Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Bahasham, Barakahak Wadash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure to the end. This is the brother Ra'aya coming at you with another lesson. And I'm going to start it off in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1. I will stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower, and will wait to see what he will say unto me, and what I shall answer when I am reproved. And the men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, chiefly at GMS or Great Millstone, as well as the brothers that come in the spirit of GMS, are standing upon their spiritual watches, doing, as it's about to say in verse 2, and Yahweh answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. Watching the news and reading the scriptures and filtering the news through the scriptures to go out onto the highways and byways preaching this word, as well as putting up video epistles like this, writing down the vision and making it plain upon tables, that the elect of the nation of Israel consisting of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans primarily, as well as the Israelite foreigners out there who look like the heathen nations, may run that readeth it, hear the words, and come back to their power, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh, casting off the ways of this world. Verse 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Every single prophecy in the scriptures that hasn't come to pass will come to pass. And though it may seem like it's taking its sweet time, everything is on the Lord's time. And the major prophecy we're waiting for is Revelation 13, verses 16 to 18, the rollout and mandatory implementation of the mark of the BEAST, which is the RFID/NFC micro C-hip implant. And for a lot of years, you've had a lot of these other Israelite groups, scoff at GMS, saying that the MOTB was the C-hip implant, saying it was everything else under the sun but that, and even taping a potato chip to their hand saying, look, I got the mark. Well, in the year of 2025, the hopeful year of the deliverance of the elect and the destruction of Esau Edom's system, you can find plenty of information showing that these countries and governments all across the planet are moving towards CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies, cashless societies. In Europe, in October, they're speaking of fully rolling out that digital euro. The Chinese have run pilot programs on a digital yuan, and even the US is talking about that digital dollar. And then, of course, who's close to DJ Donald Trump? Elon Musk, who's known for Neuralink, which will heavily play into that mark in the forehead. And as we're about to go into with my first article in this lesson on thesun.com, money move. Chase, a major U.S. financial banking system, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo quietly planning new digital dollar after U.S. penny set to disappear. And that's another thing. Physical currency is being taken out of circulation, starting with the penny. And what Donald Trump is also planned on taking paper checks out of circulation as well. And then I did a video a couple of months ago saying that, look, hey, if we take away the penny, why not move to the nickel next? Moving towards that cashless society and these digital currencies, which the MOTB, that C-hip, is going to be the middleman between you and accessing society. And as we're about to read, major banking systems are getting on board with that digital dollar. Plus, how much cash was lost through the penny production last year And this was published on May 27th of this year, 2025. Though it tarry, wait for it shall surely come. It will not tarry. Some of the largest financial institutions in the United States could be quietly planning moves away from physical cash. Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo may dive into cryptocurrency amid the impending removal of the penny. The banks are considering the options of a joint digital dollar per PYM NTS or payments. It would be operated through a stablecoin, notably a form of cryptocurrency that tied to the traditional currency, which in this case would be the US dollar. And Donald Trump said he wanted to make America the Bitcoin capital of the world. Together, they'd work to use some existing networks to facilitate transactions using the digital dollar token, such as early warning services, which operates Zelle, and the clearing house. The financial institutions seek to create a new infrastructure for the stablecoin so it's more regulated and secure. And also, what a Donald Trump signed, earlier this year, that $500 billion Stargate program to heavily, increase and build up AI infrastructure in the United States. Hey, why is that? To run and operate and easily process this system. Then it could be used consistently by consumers for efficient digital payments. So far, stablecoin in the United States doesn't have a solid regulatory framework, which is why the banks remain exploring their options as to how they could instill one. Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo are looking to create effectively the opposite of the original ethos behind cryptocurrency, which was basically to remove the institutional aspect of financial transactions while still keeping them secure. And Bitcoin and these other cryptocurrencies were just a Trojan horse to get you people on board on using digital currencies and a cashless society, thinking you were going to skirt the system. But hey, as they say at those casinos, the house always wins. That road was always going to lead back to these major financial institutions rolling out their own digital currencies. Bincy Rabi, CEO and co-founder of Utila, a crypto digital asset operations platform, said this move from top banks was inevitable. Though it tarry, wait for it shall surely come. It will not tarry. When you think about the needs of every fintech or payments company or a bank that wants to enter the stablecoin space, they need secure infrastructure, from the creation of assets such as tokenizing them to holding them and of course moving them. Robbie told Payments, everyone will enter the stablecoin era in the end. Should major banks officially get involved in stablecoin, it could bring about serious changes in the crypto space and to the future of physical currency in general. And that's the point. And that brings me to my next article on prophecynewswatch.com. One crisis away from a global economic reset. Hey, that great RESET, that fourth industrial revolution. And what's another thing you've been hearing about a lot in the news? Major hacks, talks of EMPs and grid down situations, which could lead to what? A destruction of the infrastructure, which, hey, that's exactly what the elites want. A black swan event to reset the system and bring about what? Their ultimate goal, that NWO, where everybody's in 15-minute cities on the grid using CBDCs and being C-hipped. You will eat the bugs and be happy. Imagine waking up one morning to find that your savings are frozen, your credit cards stopped working, and the dollar bill in your wallet isn't worth the paper it's printed on. It sounds dramatic, something from a dystopian novel or a bad Hollywood thriller, but behind the scenes, in the hushed chambers of central banks and the chaotic pulse of financial markets, warning bells are sounding. The global economy isn't just vulnerable, it's one crisis away from a devastating reset. And, lest we forget Trump's tariffs, which, when you look up information in the past, it was tariffs that led, or played a big hand in causing the Great Depression in the past. And what came of the Great Depression? Hey, having a social security number, a financial reset back in the day. Let's cut to the heart of the matter. National governments are drowning in debt. The world's sovereign debt now exceeds 100 trillion. The US alone accounts for roughly 35% of that total, followed by China at 16% and Japan at 10%. These aren't just numbers, they're red flags flapping violently in the wind. And when you look at the official numbers, they say the US is 34 to 35 trillion dollars in debt. But the actual, debt the US is in is closer to 230 trillion, which is completely unsustainable and unrepayable. For years, governments enjoyed virtually free money, borrowing at near zero interest rates with abandon. But the era of cheap debt is over. Investors, no longer willing to play along, are demanding higher returns for the risk of lending to increasingly unstable borrowers. This has triggered a dramatic spike in bond yields and thrown global credit markets into a state of unsettling uncertainty. Japan, the canary in the coal mine. Start with Japan. The country's bond market, one of the most placid in the world, is now on the verge of convulsion. Just last week, a weak auction of 20-year Japanese government bonds rattled investors. The yield surged to its highest level this century. The gap between the average and lowest accepted prices, known ominously as the tail, was the widest since 1987. This isn't just a hiccup, it's a symptom of deep market unease. Why does this matter to someone sitting in New York or Berlin? Because Japan's bond market is a foundation of global finance. If it starts cracking, investors around the world will rush for the exits, pulling out of other government bonds, sparking panic sales, and setting off a global chain reaction. Picture it like this: when the most stable domino begins to wobble, the rest don't stand a chance. Europe and the US following the same path. Europe's markets are not faring much better. Long-term bond yields are rising across the continent. Germany's 10-year bond yield, a benchmark for the Eurozone, has been creeping upward, and the UK is following suit. As yields rise, borrowing costs for already indebted governments soar, turning routine budget issues into potential fiscal disasters. And then there's the United States. Moody's recently downgraded the U.S. credit outlook, citing unsustainable debt and dysfunctional political gridlock. Investors took note. The yield on the 30-year Treasury briefly topped 5.08%, the highest in years. That's particularly alarming given the U.S. now spends around $1 trillion annually just on interest payments, more than the defense budget. And one of the major reasons the U.S. has been able to keep the dollar with a high purchasing value and costs being low for the average U.S. citizen is because different nations have bought these treasury bonds, which means they've been buying U.S. debt. But if it just becomes too untenable to hold the treasury bonds and they, sell them off, what would that do? Send those U.S. dollars back to the U.S. and decrease the purchasing power, leading to hyperinflation, which would ultimately lead to what? A collapse of the economic system. And as we're seeing, warning signs, not just in the U.S., but in different countries all across the planet, are flashing in the red. But this is back in Habakkuk chapter 2. I'm going to jump to verse 4. Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. And that person whose soul is not upright in him is speaking of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, the wicked of the scriptures, the border of wickedness in Malachi 1 verse 4, and the wicked whom the earth has been given into the hands of in Job 9 verse 24. Yeah, also, because he transgresseth by wine, his different philosophies out here, such as capitalism, democracy, feminism, the alphabet group beginning with LG, and his financial system were what? You just constantly rack up debt to, continue growing, which, as we're seeing, is completely unsustainable out here. Yeah, also, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. And when you look at the history of these Edomites, what is it a history of? Colonization, going to these different countries and setting up shop, labeling the native peoples as the enemy, their leaders as dictators or, tyrants, so that they can overthrow them and set up a good old democracy. And those that fight back, labeling them as what? Teists. And then once a puppet is set up, good old Uncle Sam or these other European powers are able to bring in those corporations that just grape those nations of their resources. Who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Hey, you have to have a IMF central bank in your country in order to do business with the world. And if you don't want to play ball, hey, you're a dictator. You're abusing women. You're abusing human rights. We need to send in the military to overthrow you. And then ultimately, what does that sound like? Gathering all people and nations unto himself, a one world government with one currency, one religion, etc., etc. But here's the main point I wanted to get to. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. And when we go into that word clay in the Strongs, it's H5671, aptite, which says what? Weight of pledges, heavy debts. And what are we reading about in that article? How these different nations, especially the United States of America, is laden with heavy, unsustainable debts, which the system is eventually going to crash under all that weight. And we're already seeing a lot of these nations take up that taunting proverb against Esau, primarily in the U.S., looking for other financial avenues, such as the BRICS, in a basket of currencies. But back to this article. Even worse, the new federal spending bill could pile on another $20 trillion in debt. Woe to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. And look at the average American out here. They're strapped with housing loan debt, student loan debt, credit card debt, you name it. And over the next few decades, this isn't fiscal management, it's economic roulette. Economic roulette with a fully loaded gun. Damn, you might as well say you're playing economic Russian roulette with an automatic. But, hey, there will be another Great Depression, and these economies, especially the U.S., will collapse. That's another part of biblical prophecy. This is Zephaniah chapter 1. I'm going to read verses 10 to 11. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh, the true name of the Heavenly Father, that there shall be a noise of a cry from the fish gate and a howling from the second. And the fish gate is representative of what? A major place of commerce. Think of Wall Street, for example. There shall be a noise from the fish gate and an howling from the second and a great crashing from the hills. And in the scriptures, governments can be represented as mountains and hills. So a crashing of the hills or the governments would be what? An economic collapse. And then on the other hand, when you look at those charts, say with the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones, when they're in the green, you see those arrows go up. But when they're in the red, they go down. And they have jagged edges like what? A mountain range. So what? A crashing of the hills. Again, a crashing of these different stocks and bonds and economies. Verse 11, how ye inhabitants of Maktesh, for all the merchant people are cut down. Those that buy and sell, heavily involved in the economy. All they that bear silver are cut off. Now I want to get Zephaniah 1 and 11 in a few different translations. This is in the New International Version. Wail, you who live in the market district, commerce, the economy. All your merchants will be wiped out. All who trade with silver will be destroyed. In the New Living Translation, wail in sorrow, all you who live in the market area, for all the merchants and traders will be destroyed. And how would they be destroyed? In an economic collapse. Another Great Depression. Let's go back to this article. I read this. Imagine a scenario. A bond auction fails in Japan. Panic spreads to European markets and U.S. yields jump. Trading algorithms trigger massive sell-offs. Derivatives explode in value. And banks begin to collapse under the weight of margin calls. Credit markets freeze. ATMs go dark. Hey, all that trade in silver are cut off, and all the merchantmen are wiped out. But what would be the next step? From collapse to control, the rise of digital currencies. And remember what we read about in that previous article. JP Morgan, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo are moving towards instituting a digital dollar. Which, let me see. But yeah, I'll just read this. What happens if the whole system crashes? Governments will scramble to restore order, but likely with a new kind of control. And remember that Economist cover that I believe came out in the late 80s, early 90s, where it showed a phoenix rising from the ashes, and on its chest it had what looked like a digital currency logo. From collapse to control, the rise of the digital currency. Enter central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, the digital replacements for cash already being tested around the world. In a full-scale economic reset, a CBDC could be introduced to stabilize the economy, but this new digital money would come with strings attached, programmable spending, expiry dates, which I believe it was China that said they wanted to set limits on their digital yuan to where you had to spend it all in a particular month, in that month, or else you would lose access to it. And unprecedented levels of surveillance and control. Your ability to spend could be regulated based on your behavior, Social status or carbon footprint. What sounds like a lifeline could quickly become a leash. And again, also with China, what do they have? The social credit score, to where if you speak against the government online, jaywalk, you buy purchases deemed questionable to the government because they're from a country that's not friendly with the government, your social credit score goes down and you lose access to getting certain apartments, traveling on public transportation, or getting certain jobs. And then, they mentioned a carbon footprint. What are they heavily talking about over in the U.S.? Carbon credits, to where they want to get it to where, when you're in that 15-minute city, you only have 2 to 4 pairs of clothes to use for a year, because they don't want to, use all those materials, waste all those materials, which you buy in multiple clothes. You can only travel so far, using so much gasoline, or buy a certain amount of meat to keep those greenhouse gases down. What sounds like a lifeline could quickly become a leash. And how would they be able to regulate all people's, financial behaviors? Hey, that C-hip in them. You don't want to play ball with the system? We're going to turn it off. Which finally brings us to a precept, you sincere Akim and Aqua that are in the know should be well aware of by now. Revelation 13, verse 16. And he causeth all, that he being the elite rulers of the planet right now, who are of the nation of Esau, Edom, the so-called white man, that he that want to gathereth unto him all peoples and nations, specifically their elites, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, you name it. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, everyone in society, to receive a mark, that C-hip, in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, get a job, travel abroad, do anything, save he that had the mark, or the name of the BEAST, or the number of his name. Back in this article. But this new digital money could come with strings attached, programmable spending, expiry dates, and unprecedented levels of surveillance and control. Your ability to spend, buy, or sell could be regulated based on your behavior. Social status or carbon footprint, what sounds like a lifeline, could quickly become a leash. Why this matters? You might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with my daily life? Everything. Your mortgage rate, your retirement fund, the price of gas, your job stability, they all hinge on the stability of the financial system. If confidence collapses and panic sets in, ordinary people suffer first and hardest. The people at the top have parachutes. You don't. We are living in a time when the global economy is balancing on a knife's edge. One crisis, whether a failed bond auction, a major cyber attack, a geopolitical shock, or a derivatives explosion, could tip the world into economic dark ages. Again, though it tarry, wait for it shall surely come. It will not tarry. Life as we know it, reality, is finally catching up to the scriptures, which were written thousands of years ago, and they are no longer tarrying, but are at the door. So that's it with this video. With this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We are almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.